Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Field Notes, the infrastructure podcast. I'm your host, Abby Crawford, and today we are diving into a topic that's reshaping the way we think about telecom infrastructure, how AI and automation are transforming deployment and operations. And I am thrilled to be joined by someone who's right at the center of this evolution, Mr. Stephen Rose, a seasoned tech leader whose journey spans from leadership at IBM to his current role at Render Networks. Stephen, welcome to Field Notes.
Great to be here. Thank you very much.
Of course. So I just want to jump right in and I want to start with your story. You have had a fascinating career. So from IBM now to Render Networks, I want to know what has been the common thread throughout your journey in tech, from where it started to where you are now.
Oh. Yeah. So I think it's interesting. I think my career started on just the very simple of building 3G networks around the world, and I kind of saw that as a very interesting period and whatnot. But what I came to realize, especially with the during the 3G, when we went into 4G and now 5G, you realize that actually the business case and the use cases change, and then the problems change with them as well. So my career really went from sort of hardcore design and implementation of these networks and getting them in to wherever they needed to be, from Poland or whether right at the start of my career to some really interesting places like the Solomon Islands and Papua New Guinea, where you see really interesting impact.
Yeah.
But actually, what was really interesting is when you get the advent of networked technologies like AI and cloud and automation, coupled to networks, and then you start really seeing some really interesting use cases. And then the reality is that actually the leadership problems and the change management problems are quite drastically different from what they were in the old days. So again, it was more about making technology available in the past. Now really it is trying to tie all of these and stitch all of these technologies together and create new value out of them. So quite a shift in the way you need to think and understand the value of networks.
Yeah. How did you even get into the tech industry? How did this
Oh,
start for you?
well, pure luck. I mean, I came out of the British Army and rang a mate of mine and said, I'm free and not sure what to do. And he said, well, how about becoming working in telco? And I said, well, I don't know the first thing about it. And he said, well, that's great. You could be a project manager. So,
Wow.
so that was where I really started. And then, just very quickly over a few years, I started to see that the problems were pretty universal. Yeah. And so I set up a consulting firm that was really just looking at, if you've got big problems and you've got smart people, you put those things together. And that's what I did for the first probably 5 years of my career. And that was really fascinating space to learn.
I love that perspective. You have big problems and smart people, put them together. That's
Pretty
cool.
much it.
So before we continue, I just want to talk a little bit more about Render Networks. For anybody that is not familiar with what exactly Render does, can you explain what it is that Render
Yeah,
does?
yeah, absolutely. So Render Networks was founded about 10 years ago, just over 10 years ago in Australia. And the guy that started the company, Dan Fleming, he was the co-founder. He was the guy that was actually responsible for rolling out the NBN network in Australia. And he was
Okay.
fed up of being able to run and deploy all of these fantastically complex series of activities on fiber networks, running them on the back of a proverbial cigarette packet. It was basically an Excel spreadsheet saying, how do we deploy thousands and thousands and thousands of miles of fiber on the back of Excel and track and run that? And of course that became impossible. So
Yeah.
he set the company up to actually then build a construction management software platform that allowed you to see actually how to ingest uh, um, designs from designers. Yeah. So figuring out where those designs come in, populating the platform with all of the tens of thousands of activities, and then being able to close out in the platform. So that's what Render does, is it allows companies to actually manage and run their construction management platform, or sorry, their construction management processes through our platform.
So cool. So Render's approach is integrating technology into infrastructure, which is a
Yeah.
great example of where our industry is headed. feel like I see that every day. Building on that, I would love to know what initially drew you to the infrastructure space and what keeps you excited about it.
Yeah, I think there's sort of some extrinsic and some intrinsic, sort of motivators there. I think when you really see the power of, and again, I mentioned before, I've deployed these networks all across the world. When you see the impact of technology in rural communities or semi-rural communities, or then you start to see the power of innovation that you can unlock,
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
that's a very, very interesting sort of human or societal level ambition. And I think that's absolutely right. And I think the BEAD program and various
Yeah.
other programs, of course, are there to do that. And I think that's fantastic. But actually, what I also found fascinating about the infrastructure space is just the sheer scale of it. I mean, you're deploying tens of thousands of miles of fiber every single week. Every single year, I should say. There are many myriad of leadership and management problems that come along with that. I find that particularly fascinating because again, you've got sort of tactical problems that are really interesting to solve for, but the strategic problems that you're dealing with at the same time are brilliant as sort of long-term objectives. So yeah, it's a truly fascinating space.
How do you balance the two?
Um, well, I think again you end up solving them concurrently if you are able to manage and implement a fiber network. And the problem that we see on fiber networks is that 60% of them, or something like in the order of 60% of them, are deployed over budget. And they're
Mhm.
deployed often over budget because they haven't been managed properly. And again, they're being run on the back of Excel spreadsheets. You don't have the visibility, you don't have the transparency. So when you do that and you do that well, of course, then investors will come back with more money because they're more confident that the second time round you're going to get it right. So I
Yeah.
think solving that problem, a stitch in time saves nine, solving that problem nice and early, um, doing it in what we call the render way, but doing it in the right way, which is having a well designed and well executed deployment will always then reap the long-term benefits. So I think a lot of people sort of get that convoluted and they're trying to save money up front
Yeah.
by not spending money on software or not spending money in the way that they should do. And of course, that short-sightedness always comes back to haunt you later on.
Right. It would be long term, it would be smarter just to do it right the first time. You would think that would be the goal, right?
First time right, CFO's dream. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So with that being said, I want to zoom out a little bit. You've clearly had a dynamic and purpose-driven path in infrastructure. With that perspective in mind, I'm curious, what do you see as working right now in telecom infrastructure, and where do you think it's still falling short? I know you just said doing it right the first time is an area, but where do you see where things are working well?
I think there's a maturing in this part of the industry around the ecosystem, which I think is it's encouraging. It's nowhere near where it needs to be. If
Mhm.
you look at the way that open APIs should be working between program management and construction management platforms and OSS and BSS systems, for example, that openness of ecosystem isn't fully matured or anywhere near matured in the way that live networks have got lots of ecosystems and lots of open integrations and whatnot. So
Yeah.
I think there's definitely an opportunity there. And we've seen that with recent ones that we've done with Vetro as a good example of that. Um, but I think there's a lot to do on that front. I think the second thing is again there is a basic need to digitalize the processes that are involved in rolling out fiber networks or any other kind of infrastructure. It could be utilities, it could be um, wireless networks, whatever it happens to be. I think the maturity around leadership, supervisory levels, and field teams embracing and adopting the technology at the kind of scale that again that you see in mature live networks, we're a long way from that yet. So I think at that stage in the industry, digital adoption is a major hurdle to overcome. Paper processes and looking at blueprints on the hood of an F-150
Yeah.
or whatever, that's still prevalent in the industry today.
Yeah, that blows my mind. That's a great overview of where the industry stands today. I completely agree. Both there's progress and then there's also pain points, but that's with anything. Um, Digging a little bit deeper into that for our viewers, let them know, what do you think people misunderstand about infrastructure and how it's deployed, but not only deployed, but also maintained?
Yeah, well, I think the first thing is that we've always done it this way, and because we've always done it this way,
Yeah.
it's the way to do it. I think that's the most dangerous statement that you can ever make. One of our previous team made that comment to me, and I couldn't agree with it more. So I think it's essential that we embrace the technology, but I think where some of the
Yeah.
misunderstanding and some of the anxiety comes from, of course, is this going to take over jobs? Is AI and
Mhm.
automation going to make all manner of people redundant and whatnot? The reality is field teams are not going to be made redundant because of that. It's going to enable them. It's going to make certain things like invoicing more seamless, because you can
Sure.
close out in the platform and everybody can see if the quality assurance standards have been met, or whatever, contractual criteria. And then everybody invoices go upstream and invoices can come from downstream, and everybody wins. So I
Yeah.
think those are, lots of opportunities, but I don't think people see it that way. I think where there is some impact is maybe on the supervisory level. It doesn't take as many people to aggregate and collate all of the data and
Yeah.
all of the live sort of progress that is being done with the as builts of the network. So I think there is maybe some impact there, but the business case is really about avoiding rework. And then,
Yeah.
of course, again, it is, to your point on maintenance. What you're able to do is able to take all of that as built data, and you
Mhm.
use that to inform how you do operations and maintenance going forward as well. So you can have a decent set of records. You can see where everything is. You can see what the state of it is, and you can do a lot with that in terms of just minimizing the impact on unnecessary operations and maintenance.
Yeah, saving time, saving money.
Absolutely, no truck
Yeah.
rolls, less impact to less gas, less
Right.
energy consumption, etc. There's a whole bunch of reasons why you really want to do that.
Yeah. AI is so cool to me. It's so complex. I think it's often misunderstood, like we're saying. But to continue on the conversation of AI and automation, how is Render Networks using AI to streamline deployment and operations?
Yeah, I mean, AI gets used, and again, to your point, I think a lot of people misunderstand AI. It can be
Hmm.
actually used in fairly simplistic ways,
Yeah.
for analytics and reporting, for example, and that would be more on the traditional AI. I think in the field teams, there's a lot of opportunity. If you can take photographs and you can, actually decide using visual inspection AI capabilities, you're able
Yeah.
to then see whether something has been built to standard or not, and then of course you can correlate a good deployment with a bad deployment, so to speak. And then supervisory levels don't need to analyze everything. They can see if there's a probability of the assurance standards being met, and therefore they'll only focus on where there is let's say you were looking for 90% confidence. Anything below 90% confidence you might inspect. So a lot of opportunity there. I think speech to text, and then actually analyzing the speech. So if you're taking input from multiple field teams across a deployment, you wouldn't necessarily pick those up because they might come across as 25, 30, 100 different emails. But when you
Mhm.
take that into one system, you're receiving feedback. You might pick up on some trends around bad design, for example, that you could then put that upstream. Yeah. And then the
Sure.
analytics and reporting for forecasting, based on historical data, what is
Hmm.
the likelihood of the network being rolled out within a certain time, um, and space? And if you can do that, of course, you can then report up to your shareholders more confidently. So lots of areas to use AI.
Do you have any real world examples of how automation has improved efficiency?
Well, again, I think the biggest thing is one of the biggest areas is on the supervisory level, simply because they don't need to correlate tens of different
Mhm.
emails or tens of different pieces of input, and then actually dig through every single one and whatnot. So I think
Yeah.
there's a lot of opportunity for the supervisory level, dynamically distributing the resources. So when the assumption is there's the piece of technology or a piece of inventory and a crew are available, correlating those two things to the next best action, I think that is also an obvious place in which you don't have the humans in the loop thinking about it and doing sort of manual resourcing tasks. Yeah, you got the
Right.
system to do that for you. And then again, it's in the rework, really. It is making sure that problems don't go too far before you catch them early and say, actually, that
Yeah.
needs a rework. And by that time, maybe the field team is deployed and is 200 miles away from where you need them to be, and then you have to send them back 200 miles. So lots of small optimizations that when you add them all up, they become big impact.
So cool. It's exciting to hear how AI is already making such an impact on deployment and operations. But then, of course, with any powerful technology, there are challenges and risks. We've talked a lot about the opportunities. Where do you see the biggest risks and challenges with AI?
Yeah, I mean, again, you have it's really in the change leadership problem. Every single field crew that you're going to be dealing with, and the supervisory teams and the leadership in an organization, have been doing have been rolling out those networks in a certain way, and most of them have been manual tasks for years.
Hmm.
Getting those people to redefine how the work gets done in a digital way, yeah.
Yeah.
Making sure that they understand what the new reporting flows are, making sure that the adoption in the field, so that this thing, which is not particularly sympathetic to the human condition, certainly not sympathetic to field teams, yeah, if you think about it, yeah, how do you get them to be encouraged to adopt the new ways of working? So we put a lot of focus not just on the technology, but the UI, making sure that the UI is amenable, and that field teams can understand it, making sure that there aren't too many buttons to press, when you're
Yeah.
reporting your progress. Again, it's just been having that empathy for somebody that's been working in rural Alabama. It's the middle of summer, it's 100 degrees, they've rolled out a whole bunch of fiber, they've been digging roads, they're dirty, sweaty, and tired. The last thing that they want to do is go through a very long-winded list of things to check and report upwards on. So it's just having that
That's
level of empathy and sympathy. And then again, when you bring it to the next level and the next level, understanding what the use case is. And then once you understand the use case, then you can actually design the system accordingly. So we put a lot of focus on use cases, because the use cases for a construction manager, or for a commercial manager, or for
yeah,
a procurement director, they're all slightly different, and you just have to
sure.
understand what those roles are and how the platform can be useful for them.
I love your approach of differentiation and also being empathetic because it can be a huge change or just a big adjustment for people.
Yeah.
And that's just gives us a great sense of where we are today with AI and the potential of and pitfalls with AI. So looking ahead, what excites you the most in the next 5 to 10 years in this space?
Again, I think the maturity of digital adoption is accelerating. So I think that's a great opportunity. But I think back to what I was saying earlier, the ecosystem is where it becomes really interesting, because then you have seamless integration between workflows.
Yeah,
You can maximize that. I think the other opportunity, of course, is that you can take all of that learning from the telco space and you can move it across to other industries pretty quickly as well. So electric utility, deploying the electric
yes,
utility networks there, obviously there's the actual network itself, as in the electric network, but they also often have fiber and wireless networks associated with them as well. So
right.
again, bringing that experience into other industries and helping them accelerate on their adoption, and also not making the same mistakes that telco's been making. Yeah, you
Yeah,
get an opportunity. So the symbiosis between different industry verticals is becoming greater, especially with the electrification of industry. So I think that's
yeah.
an opportunity for us to learn as well.
Very cool. We've covered a lot of exciting ground about where the industry is headed. And before we wrap up here, I'd love to get your take on platforms like SkyWare. That's a new platform that Fibercom has created, which is just pushing the boundaries of how we collect and visualize and act on utility pole infrastructure data in real time. How do you see tools like this, like SkyWare, fitting into the broader ecosystem?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a perfect example of. I mean, one of the things that I learned when I was at IBM was there's no AI without IA, information architecture, and I think any firm that is providing the bedrock for data, being able to pull together data, being able to make sure that it's useful, aggregating it, and then being able to deploy it through large language or small language models or different platforms like Render. I think that's a true opportunity. But I think everything starts with the data. So get that right, and your chances of success are exponentially higher than if you start with the other way around, which is I've got a platform and then you have no idea what data you've got. It's very,
Right.
very difficult to get those things to marry. So I think that's a great example.
I completely agree. I just wanted to pick your brain and get your perspective on that, especially as we think about how all these tools and platforms are starting to work together, like you were
Yeah.
saying, to create just a more connected infrastructure space. On this note, this has been such an awesome conversation. Is there anything, Stephen, that you want to share with our audience before we wrap up? Any insights or exciting things that you have in mind?
Well, so we're going to be at ISC in a couple of weeks from now. So, I'm looking forward to everybody being there. We'll be at a whole bunch of other events during the year. But again, I really look forward to just everybody talking to us much more about where the integrations can happen and how powerful they can be. And
Yeah.
actually, the most important thing is how do you get them to market? Because there's lots of integrations out there that sit on the shelf and collect dust. What we want to make sure is that we take those integrations and we bring them to market and that our customers can really benefit from that straight away. So that's the bit that
Yeah.
I'm probably looking forward to the most.
Yeah, just making it, I think a big part of that is making it important to them. Like
Yeah.
rate explaining why it's important, explaining how awesome it is. And I think conversations like this are exactly what this industry needs, just to share the importance of all of it and how it really works to eliminate the misunderstandings and the confusion that I think there is.
Yeah, absolutely. As Simon Sinek says, everything starts with why, right? It always starts with why. So couldn't agree more.
Exactly. So for our listeners, if you enjoyed this podcast, be sure to subscribe to Field Notes on YouTube, follow us on Spotify, and if you're curious about how AI is shaping the future of infrastructure, stay tuned. We've got more great conversations coming your way. Thank you again, Mr. Rose. This has been another episode of Field Notes. That's it from the field. Stay grounded.